All right, let's move on to the next one.
Yeah, it's interesting, that we're still talking security in a way because just recently we understand that the Ekiti state government filed a suit to challenge the section of the Police Act which provides for the compulsory discharge of an unmarried pregnant policewoman from the police force. And right now we have Olawale Faponda, who is Attorney General of Ekiti State. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Well, it is law, and it's like this is what we have now. Could you give us a backstory, if there's any, to this, and why do we have to get to this point?
Well, thank you first for having me. The backstory is essentially that the governor of the state received several petitions concerning the situation of the policewoman. The petitions were largely from rights groups, women's rights groups in particular, from within and outside Nigeria. So we had to then directed the Ministry of Justice to look into the matter. We looked into it, invited the police officer, and we saw merit in the complaint. So we thought that having calmly assessed the complaint, we felt that it's an issue that borders on fundamental human rights. And in this case, we were convinced that our rights were violated. So the Minister of Justice thought that the most appropriate way is to seek judicial review of that particular provision in the Police Act. But having said that, even before now, as part of the government of Ekiti State's contribution to the ongoing conversation about police reform, we have put together a memorandum, particularly the National Assembly, to look into these issues. And there are a number of areas in the police act of regulations that we have flagged. For example, Section 118 of the regulation says that if you are married, you cannot even be enlisted in the force. Section 124, which has been set aside by the Federal High Court, that has to deal with permission, getting permission from higher police authorities before you get married. That has been set aside. Section 125, again, if you are married, no special privileges for you as a policewoman. Section 126, maternity leave is not your right. You may be granted maternity leave on application. So that includes Section 127, which says that you cannot be unmarried and pregnant. So looking at all these provisions, we thought that it cannot be the intention of the police not to want women or even married women in their life. These areas require urgent intervention, and this is why we are raising this conversation. It's not all for us about litigation. We hope that these the steps that we have taken will lead to a broader conversation on the place of policewomen in the Nigerian police. So this is where we are.
Well, one of the questions that comes to mind right now, Mr. Faponda, is it would seem like this is a double-edged sort of an issue, so to speak. On the one hand is the fact that one way or another it impinges on the morale of people who are employed to prevent crime. On the other hand is the gender balance or not of the issue. Which one takes precedence in this case, where you stand?
Morality, we are not yes, the issue of morality has been thrown at us several times. We are not approaching the church or the mosque for a determination of this issue. Our issue is essentially that of fundamental human rights. We are calling on the courts to look at it and see whether, this particular provision, and maybe even other provisions that we may consider introducing at some stage, are discriminatory. The non-discriminatory provisions of the Constitution are very clear. We believe that if we are going to talk about the rights of women, gender issues that you alluded to, It cannot be just in theory. Both the federal government and even the state government, there is a consensus. And if you like, even nationally, there's a consensus that we need to do a lot more to protect the rights of women. How? The challenge has always been, how do we take what is written in paper, the laws? We have laws. There are a number of progressive laws. In the state, we have probably one of the most progressive laws in the country in terms of protecting the rights of women. But what will make sense to our people is that we take those laws from the letters of in the laws to actual, to concrete deliverables. It's only when we have a determination and enforcement of this law that it really only begins to make sense that we are truly on the path to protecting the rights of women.
What do you say to the school of thought that holds that, well, it's not being gazetted, and that's why sometimes they're reluctant to carry out those laws, even though it's been repealed by the Police Act?
Well, which is part of the conversation that we need to have. I think that if litigation under normal circumstances should be the last resort, and we resorted to litigation simply because the need of this woman is present, is immediate. We have to respond quickly. But there is a broader conversation that needs to be had, in terms of what value do we even put on this issue of gender. Across the country, we talk about gender, we talk about the rights of women, we talk about these issues. How does it affect our women, And this, with the police is a classical case in point. How do you suddenly make marriage a disadvantage when you want to get into the police force? Marriage should be, a beautiful thing. And in our case, for us in Ekiti State, it's not just about, our intervention is not simply about law, justice, or human rights issues. There's an economic dimension to this. We have a lot of our women who want to join the police force, but they are intimidated by this regulation. You must not be married. In fact, when you read several provisions of these regulations, you will think that there is a deliberate attempt to prevent married women from joining the police. And we think that cannot be the intention of the police. So what we need to do going forward, I think, as a country, is to have a conversation. And we hope that this will lead to that broader national conversation with respect to what do we really mean when we talk about the enforcement of the rights of women. Strengthening women, particularly in public and private life, cannot just be a theoretical concept. It has to be something, has to be solid. Women must have something to hold on to. And in our view, yes, the court is important, but there needs to be a broad-based national consensus on, the value we attach to our women, particularly those who want to join security institutions.
I think something else that might help in that conversation to reach a consensus is to really find out how we got here, because this case is an eye-opener for a lot of people. They never thought a provision like that existed, such that an unmarried policewoman who becomes pregnant shall be discharged from the force and shall not be enlisted except with the approval of the IGP. A lot of people saw that and they were shocked, like, really? And that's just one of many. You've referenced that, this is one of many that you are hoping to draw attention to and hopefully repeal them. But, lawyers talk about the letter and the spirit of a law. There's the debate still ongoing out there, but help us understand, how did we end up with such a provision? Because looking at the letter, some people would even say, even the spirit, it doesn't quite make sense. So how did we end up with something like this in the first place?
Well, it again has to do with the priority we have placed on admission of justice reform over the years. You may recall that the Police Act itself was recently, the new Police Act itself was only signed into law by the president last year. Those of us that were involved in the advocacy before now, the process started actually in 1999. Somehow, the regulations probably did not catch attention of both government and civil society alike, because we had spent a lot of energy trying to get the Police Act, reformed, trying to get it reviewed, trying to get a new act that really make sense to our people, that we probably did not look at the regulations. So looking at the regulations, you may think that it is it's some regulation that was made for time past. The country has moved on. Nigerians have moved on. Both federal government and state government policies all affirm the appropriate place of women in public life. So maybe what we did not do is or what we need to do now is to take steps to make sure that the regulation complies with today's reality, with the policy of the federal government, with the policy of state government. That may take a while, but again, we really need to. If we are serious about enforcing the rights of women, we need to have a holistic view. Look at our laws, look at our relevant regulations. I'm told that this issue is not just with the police, it's across the security agencies. We may have to look across board. What makes, when we talk about gender equality, what do we really mean as a country? Do we mean gender equality, but doesn't apply to security agencies, or do we mean gender equality broadly across all spheres of public life? So these are the conversations we need to have. And I'm hoping that, with the constitutional amendment process that is ongoing, and I hope that will reach conclusion this time, it may be an opportunity to have a holistic look about all these issues that affect the strengthening of women in our country.
It's the point you made about it's not just in the police, because if you check, you see that even in last year, 2020, sometime in August, I think, the police, there was that report where they dismissed, the army, they dismissed an officer, and it turns out that she was even raped, and then she got pregnant, and so she was tried, and she was dismissed. So that is one of those scenarios that you think, are these things actually happening? How far away or close are we to addressing all of these issues? Because if you're done with this matter, who knows how we can actually sit back and say, listen, look, we can't allow these kind of things go on anymore in society. Do you see that action continuing and being concluded, and we address all of this headlong?
Well, yes, for us, in say charity begins at home. Our first constituency is to ensure that in this state, we enact laws, we put in place policies, and there's adequate political will to ensure that in Ekiti State, that when we talk about gender equality, when we talk about our being having a zero tolerance for all forms of violations of rights of women, we mean it. That is happening in this state. Do we still have a long way to go? Absolutely. There's still lots of things to be done. Nationally, it's the same issue. You may recall that recently the governors adopted this state of emergency on issues of gender violence. That is progress. And in Nigeria, we are particularly lucky. The governor of the state is the chairperson of the Governors Forum. That gives us a platform to raise some of these issues on a national level. The wife of the governor is one of the leading authorities on the protection of the rights of women. That again gives us subject matter appreciation. So we have the platform. Do we need to do a lot more at the national level? Absolutely. And the process has begun, as I said. I note that in the proposals around the constitutional amendments that was put forward, these issues are there. So hopefully we will have a serious and focused conversation on what more we need to do as a country to affirm the rights of women. But certainly we still have a lot more to do.
That's one more issue to raise with you, but before that one, take this one. Perhaps some of the issues that we have raised now only speak to the lawmaking process that one needs to look at, because on the one hand, Nigeria is signatory to so many of these, things that you have referenced, including the Sustainable Development Goals, one of which is gender equality and all of that. And then on the other hand, are such laws, including the one that was just recently passed last year, signed by the president, as you have said, and still has these discriminatory regulations. Speaking in terms of the processes of lawmaking, is there a fault somewhere that we need to address? If you can quickly look at that.
Of course, it's the lawmaking process. I think it's a lot easier at the state level. Usually, from my experience in the state, there's a consensus. There's a consensus between the executive and the legislature on this issue. We have prioritized gender equality. We have prioritized zero tolerance for all forms of violence against women as a crucial component of government policy. So we are in tandem with our House of Assembly. Enactment of laws is not the problem. Now, do we have issues with enforcement? Absolutely. We have issues. Don't forget, again, one of the realities that came to fore reading the petitions that were addressed to the governor of the state is the misunderstanding among a lot of our people that the governor has power over appointment and dismissal of police officers. That is not so. And that also goes to the enforcement of these rights. Can we do a lot more in terms of enforcement? Absolutely. But crucial to the conversation is also awareness. And which is why in our state, the state government has put a lot of premium on awareness, not only, talking public gathering awareness, but also media awareness. Now, it is a little bit more difficult at the national level. Getting these laws passed at the national level, it can be a challenge. In my former life, I participated in conversations around the Violence Against Persons Act. I have seen the difficulties at the National Assembly in passing through, basic rights like Child Rights, Act, which I participated in. So there are a number of challenges at the national level because of many issues, culture, perceptions. It's a little bit more difficult. But, the fact remains, we need to have a national consensus. And again, I hope that the constitutional reform process will achieve that. We have to have the discussion. Simply paying lip service to this.
Thankfully, we're having some sort of discussion here today, so I hope it will build up to that bigger discussion. And I really hope that Corporal Omolola gets enough support, during this process and even afterwards. But just before we round off in about a minute, we were discussing the issues of violent attacks from bandits, violent herdsmen, just before you joined us. And, you're the chief law officer of your state, and we also touched on the fact that there isn't enough political will, as it would seem, for prosecution and all that, such that it will serve as a deterrent to those who might want to commit these crimes in future. For you, because, there are farmers who have had issues with herdsmen, there were some arrests made by Amoteco and the police in your state. How challenging really is following through with that process, such that once the arrests are made, there is no compromise, they are taken to court, and it's followed through such that we get proper prosecution?
I think in Ekiti State, we don't, we are privileged, if you like. We don't have that issue. We have a very good relationship with the police in this state. We have the political will to achieve, to respond to crime, safety, and security in our state. We have a professionalized Ministry of Justice. We have a professionalized Director of Public Prosecution. We have a competent court, both to the High Court and the Magistrate Court. Do we have challenges with with prosecution? Sometimes, yes, it is there. But it all boils down to again ensuring that we give the police adequate resources to take these matters through. In some of the cases, we find that investigation may be a problem. But again, as I said, I hope that broadly we realize that one of the solutions to ensuring security may lie in achieving appropriate police reform, giving the police the resources, the tools to respond to our security needs.
Well, I guess moving forward, we'll have to do a lot more paying attention to the processes when these bills are being passed or debated so that we can nip them in the bud rather than wait for them to be on. But we do thank you for your perspectives, Mr. Wale Fakwan, the Attorney General of Ekiti State.